presenter of this group. So let's talk about the 6 types of assessment to use in our classroom. So how do we use the different types of assessment in our classroom to promote student learning? So school closures and remote or blended learning plans mean that it is more important than ever to understand student knowledge and the learning process. Students need to recover lost skills and continue to learn. And you need to know how to make your students or how to make your lesson plans effective. But testing can contribute to math anxiety for many students. Assessment can be difficult to structure properly and time-consuming to grade. And as a teacher, you know that student progress isn't just a number on a report card. There's so much more assessments than delivering an end-of-unit exam or prepping for a standardized test. Assessment can help shape the learning process at all points and give you insight into students' learning. So here is the first type of assessment, the diagnostic assessment. So let's say you're starting a lesson on 2-digit multiplication. To make sure the unit goes smoothly, you want to know if your student have mastered fact, families, place value, and 1-digit multiplication before you move on to more complicated questions. So when you structure diagnostic assessments around your lesson, you'll get the information you need to understand student knowledge and engage your whole classroom. So some examples to try include mind maps, flow charts, KWL charts, short quizzes, journal entries, student interviews, student reflections, graphic organizers, and classroom discussions. So diagnostic assessments can also help benchmark student progress. Consider giving the same assessment at the end of the unit so students can see how far they've come. So the second type of assessment is the formative assessment. So just because students can make it to the end of unit test doesn't mean they've mastered the skill. So formative assessments help teachers understand student learning while they teach and adjust their teaching strategies accordingly. Meaningful learning involves processing new facts, adjusting assumptions, and drawing nuances conclusions. Or as in researchers Thomas Romberg and Thomas Carpenter describe it, that current research indicates the acquired knowledge is not simply a collection of concepts and procedural skills filed in long-term memory. Rather, the knowledge is structured by individual in meaningful ways with grow and change over time. So formative assessments can help you track how your students' knowledge is growing and changing in your classroom in real time. While it requires a bit of time investments, especially at first, the gains are more than worth it. So some examples of formative assessments includes group projects, progress reports, class discussions, entry and exit tickets, short or regular quizzes, and virtual classroom tools like Summative or Kahoot. So next, when running formative assessments in your classroom, it's best to keep them short, easy to create, and consistent. Introducing students to formative assessments in a low-stakes way can help you benchmark their progress and reduce math anxiety when a big test day roll around. So the third type of assessment is the summative test. So summative assessments measure students' progress as an assessment of learning and provide data for you, school leaders, and district leaders. So they are cost-efficient and valuable when it comes to communicating student progress, but they don't always give clear feedback on the learning process and can foster a teach-to-test mindset if you're not careful. Thus, they are stressful for teachers. One Harvard survey found 60% of teachers said preparing students to pass mandated standardized tests dictates most of or substantially affects their teaching. But just because it is a summative assessment doesn't mean it can't be engaging for students and useful for your teaching. So let's try create a assessments that deviate from the standard multiple choice test, like recording a podcast, writing a script for a short play, and producing an independent study project. So no matter what type of summative assessment you give your students, keep some best practices in mind. So keep it real-world relevant, where you can first make questions clear and instructions easy to follow. Give a rubric so students know what's expected of them. Create your final test after, not before, teaching the lesson. Try blind grading. Don't look at the name on the assignment before you mark it. So the next type of assessment is the ipsative assessments. So ipsative assessments are one of the type of assessments as learning that compares previous results with a second try, motivating students to set goals and improve their skills. So when a student hands in a piece of creative writing, it's just the first draft. They practice athletic skills and musical talents to improve, but don't always get the same chance when it comes to other subjects like math. So a two-stage assessment frameworks help students learn from their mistakes and motivates them to do better. Plus, it removes the instant gratification of goals and teaches students learning is a process. So you can incorporate ipsative assessment into your classroom with portfolios, a two-grade testing process, and/or project-based learning activities. So one study on ipsative learning techniques found that when it was used with higher education distance learners, it helped motivate students and encourage them to act on feedback to improve their grades. What could it look like in your classroom? So the fifth type of assessment is the norm reference assessment. So norm reference assessments are tests designed to compare an individual to a group of their peers, usually based on national standards and occasionally adjusted for age, ethnicity, or other demographics. So unlike ipsative assessments, when the student is competing against themselves, norm reference assessments draw from a wide range of data points to make conclusions about students' achievements. So type of norms reference assessment includes IQ test, physical assessments, standardized college admissions tests like the SAT and GRE. So proponents of norm reference assessments point out that they accentuate differences among test takers and make it easy to analyze large-scale trends. So critics argue they don't encourage complex thinking and can inadvertently discriminate against low-income students and minorities. So norm reference assessments are most useful when measuring students' achievement to determine first, language ability, grade readiness, physical development, college admission decisions, need for additional and learning support. So while they're not usually the type of assessments you deliver in your classroom, chances are you have access to data from past tests that can give you valuable insights into student performance. So the last type of assessment is the Criterion-referenced assessments. So Criterion-referenced assessments compare to the score of an individual student to a learning standard and performance level independent of other students around them. So in the classroom, this means measuring students' performance against grade level standard can include end of unit or final tests to assess students' understanding. So outside of the classroom, Criterion-referenced assessments appear in professional licensing exams high school exits exams, and citizenship tests where the student must answer a certain percentage of questions correctly to pass. Criterion-referenced assessments are more often compared with norm-referenced assessments. While they're both valuable types of assessments of learning, Criterion-referenced assessments don't measure students against their peers. Instead, each student is graded on their own strengths and weaknesses. So that is our 6 types of assessment that we can use in our classroom. Again, I am Merrychelle Bebs Coyoca. Thank you and God bless.